Hello and welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic. Now, today I'm going to start on Sam Kappelman-Lyons' 6x6 puzzles from his recent puzzle pack, where we teased a bit that the 6x6 puzzles were intended to be harder than the quite hard 9x9 puzzles, and as mad as that sounds, I think to a huge extent he fulfilled it. I mean, a lot of people were wondering, like me, how could even a classic 6x6 be hard? Well, you can try it for yourself. I'm putting it up on the community page today, so have a look at the puzzle there, have a go at it on your own. You know, it doesn't take long to sketch it down on a piece of paper and have a try at it. To be fair, I think there are ways of doing it fast, but I think they involve bifurcation, and I'd be very happy to do that in a competition scenario. And in fact, doing it that way took me only a fraction over 2 minutes, but finding the logical path through it is much harder. We might look at that in the future, but it is only a 6x6 puzzle still. However, one of the other types that Sam prepared in the puzzle pack was a little killer, and the 6x6 little killer is here, and I'm going to go through it. Now, I'm not solving it live. I did solve it live. It took me a long time. Good luck if you try and attempt it. It's on the link below the video. Do have a go at it. Remember that the rules are that we're using 1 to 6 this time in each row, column and 3x3 box. And the arrows point to certain diagonals in the grid which sum to the number given. That's it. And not a given digit in the grid. You just get 4 little killer clues. You know, good luck. Do tell us how long you took. If you're claiming it took you less than 5 minutes, I'm not convinced anybody's going to believe you, but let us know. So, how could you solve this puzzle? Well, as I say, let's have a look. Let's get cracking. There's only 4 clues. 8, 9, 17 and 26, and they're on a string of 4, a diagonal of 4 digits, another one of 4 digits, and then these two are both 5 digits long. And let's first of all start with the 4-digit one, the 8, which is the smallest number. So the 4 digits there include 2 in 1 box. So the absolute minimum, 8's quite a small number for 4 digits. The absolute minimum numbers possible along this are 1, 1, and then a 1, 2 combination. They're in the same box. So that would be 5. And the way I look at this with the 8 is it gives you 3 degrees of freedom. So you could have 1, 1, 2, and 1. That would be too little, 5. So you'd kind of need to push the digits up by a total of 3. Now, the interesting thing about this path with the 8 on is that it crosses with the path that has the 26, which is quite a high number for 5 digits. So what is the maximum that the 26 could be? And you could have 6 here, then a 6-5 pair in box 4 and a 6-5 pair in box 1. So that would add up to 28. Now that's only 2 degrees of freedom, and that's the least in the puzzle. The 9 clue obviously has 1 more than the 8 clue, so it has 4 degrees of freedom. The 17 has plenty. It's like the minimum for its diagonal is 7, and the maximum is 28 again. So 17 is kind of right in the middle of that. It's that's not helpful at this stage. So we'll start with the 8 and the 26, which is useful because a minimum kind of clue is crossing a maximum kind of clue. Now, the 26 could have been 6, 6 and 5, 6 and 5. So the minimum this crossing cell could be is 5. And remember, there are 2 degrees of freedom with the 26, which could have gone up to 28, but no higher. So the 5 could come down as far as 3. So 3 is the minimum number for this cell. Now with the 8 clue, where it was 1, 1, and then 1 and 2, there were 3 degrees of freedom. So the 1 could be increased by 3 to 4. Now that gives us a range for this cell of 3 or 4. It can only be one of those. Now the only way I know of progressing past that point is by kind of testing it out. And it's fairly quick to test it out. You could even do this next step in your head if you're very bright. I'm going to show it to you on the grid because I'm not. So what if this was a 4? If this was a 4, that would absolutely fix. I mean, the interesting thing actually about the choice of 3 or 4 is the 3 will absolutely fix this, this pair, and this. The 4 will absolutely fix this and this pair. So whichever degree of freedom you use up, the last remaining degree of freedom from the 8 or the 26 gives you something. So I'm going to use the shorter path first. Let's say this was a 4. Then this would have to be a 1, and this would have to be a 1-2 pair. Now if that happened, look what happens on this diagonal. And I'm just going to colour this for now. Let's colour it blue. So on that diagonal, that's got to add to 9, but now it doesn't have so many degrees of freedom. The absolute minimum for these first 2 cells is 3 and 4. And then you'd have to have, that would be 7 already, and then you'd have to have 1 here and 1 here. And that's impossible because it's in the same column as a 1. So bam, that is ruled out. So the 4 is not happening, and we get a number in the grid, and that's a 3. And you could have kind of seen those rows in your head, but not simple perhaps. However, now we know it's a 3, and that's used up 2 of the 3 degrees of freedom with the 8. So we'll put in the minimum number and the one above in each case. Now this is going to be either a 1-2 pair or a 1-3 pair. So I'm going to put 1 in the corner because 1 has to be in it. And then we're selecting from 2 or 3 for the other digit. Now, what can we learn at this stage from the 9 clue this time? Well, we know it doesn't have the 1 in here, and that already uses up 2 of the 4 degrees of freedom. So the absolute minimum this could be is 2 and 3, but in fact it can't be 2 and 3 because these are going to use 1 of the 2 and 3. So we're up to an absolute minimum of 2 and 4 for these two, and that leaves a total of 9. So that's from a total of 9, take away 6, that leaves 3 for these. Or of course this could be 2 and 5 or 3 and 4, in which case these will be 2. So these 2 cells add up to either 2 or 3. So they can't contain anything more than a 2. So I'm going to fill in 1 and 2 there, and you'll notice that in column 4 now we do get a 1-2 pair, for what it's worth, not very helpful at this stage. But there are various possibilities that we have here. So we know that these 2 digits either add up to 6 or 7. If they add up to 6, they're going to have to be 2 and 4 because the 1's been used. But they could add up to 7. And if they add up to 7, they could be 3 and 4 or 2 and 5. So I'm just going to try these possibilities, frankly. So let's try it if it was 2 and 5. Then we can take the 2 out of those 2 cells. We get a 4, 6 in this pair. Now 2 and 5, every time they add up to 7, we're on to 1 for these other 2. That's going to give us a 2 here, 5 here, 2 here. You can finish that column effectively. Now we're going to have to start using the other clues at this point to see where we're going. And the 17 clue crosses at this cell. So the 17 clue is looking at these 5 cells. Now, what is that 17 clue going to be made up of? And it's difficult to see because it's such an open number. But remember that this 26 clue still, that used up some of its 2 of its degrees of freedom here. So now that we've got a 3, we could fill that in. So actually I should probably have done this before bifurcating, but never mind, we'll put it in now. 6, 3, a 5, 6 pair and a 6, and that adds up to 26. So now we know that, and that has suddenly restricted this 17 clue quite dramatically. So the maximum that these 2 cells can be is 4 and 3. If that was 4 and 3, that would be 8 so far on the diagonal. The other two cells would have to add up to 9, and look where they're positioned. Neither of them can be a 6 because of that 6 and that 6. So these are either going to have to be 4, 5, or if this isn't the absolute minimum, 5, 5. But in both cases, they must consist of the digits 4 or 5. Now, these ones have to include the 3. It's either 3, 4, or actually, could it be 2, 4? Yes, that is possible. Sorry, they don't have to include the 3. They have to include the 4. So they must be either 4, 3, or 4, 2. If they were 4, 2, this cell couldn't be the 2. Now, is this possible? What have we got here? We've got, we would have to have a 1 in this column, sorry, in one of those 2 cells, and therefore in one of those 2 cells. Now, the interesting thing you must remember here is that one of these had to be a 4 and one of them had to be a 5 if this was such that those 2 could add up to 9. So let's assume that that's the case. These were the maximum they could be, so 3 and 4. Then we'd have 1 and 2 here. Those 2 would be different ones from 4 and 5. So we'd have a 3 here. Sorry, 3 there. We'd have to have a 2 here. 3, 6, 1, 2. This would have to be 5 or 4 for the column, but then that's resolved by the 5, so it would be 4, 5. This would have to be 6 now, because every other cell is looking at it. That fixes the 5, 6. It's looking as though it's all possible here. This would have to be 3, 1. This would be 4. It resolves the 3. We get a 4 here, 5 here, 4 here, 6 here, 5 and 3 pair, 1 here, 4 here, 2 here, 5, 3, 5, 2. We've done the 1, 3 pair, and suddenly that's gone wrong. 3 in the same cell as the same row as a 3, and if we were to put a 1 in here, this has no possible realization because of the 2 and 1 in the same row. So that didn't work. So we have to undo all that. It clearly wasn't 3 and 4 in the 2 cells in box 4. So we'll go back to where it didn't have to be 3 and 4. It could have been 4 and 2. And then you'd have 5s on the outside of that diagonal. So there we go. This is the alternative presentation, assuming, remember, that this is a 2, that this adds up to 7 with a 2, 5. And I mean, really, there's very few ways of going about this without going through all the rigmarole of figuring out what every cell would contain, if that's how it works. And suddenly this is impossible because we've got a pair of 2s in the same row. So that didn't work either. So now that's established, this is not 5, 2. Now the alternative there was that there's one alternative where again it adds up to 7, and the other is where it adds up to 6. So let's try the other 7 alternative, because that's forcing those 2 1s into place. So we'll go all the way back to here, take out the 2 and 5, and replace them with 3 and 4. Then we can put in a 1 here and a 1 here again. That's exactly the same. This becomes a 2. Now, these don't have a 3, so they're a 1, 2 pair. That's a 5, 6. Now, this diagonal is still working. That adds up to 9. Adds up to 8, sorry. This one's still working. It adds up to 9. Now, again, remember, this 26 is now fixed by the 3, so we've got a 6, 5 pair and 2 6s at the end. Now, again, same situation. This can either add up to 7 or 6 to allow the formation. Remember, we've still got 6s looking at these 2 cells at the end of this. So the maximum they can be is 10. These have to add up to 7, or they could be 1 less, 6. So again, they've got to have a 4. Now they might have a 2 or they might have a 3 to go with the 4. So let's assume first of all that it's with the 3. That's 8 in the row. That gives us a 4 and 5 in the ends of that diagonal. We've got 2, 1 here. Remember, those 4 and 5 would have to be different. That gives us a 3 here. Another 4 or 5 here. Now this column is still the same. 3, 5, 6, 1 are done, so we can fill in 4 and 2. That resolves the 5, 4 at the top. 2 must now be here. 3, 1, 6 get filled in. And we're racing along thinking we might be there this time. But you're not going to be surprised to learn that it's going to go wrong in a moment. So even though we get this far, 1 there, 2, 1, and we've got 2 and 5 to fit in here. They can still go. 5, 3 here. Looking good at this point until then we have to go 3 here, and now this is impossible. We can't put a 4 in there because there's a 4 in the row. We can't put a 3 in. We've just put 1 in the box. So that didn't work either. Unbelievable. Although I kind of knew it was going to happen. So it's not 7 that those first 2 digits on the 9 diagonal add up to. So they must add up to 6. And unfortunately that gives us a bit more latitude with what to do at the end of the diagonal. So we rewind to here and we can put in 2 and 4, and we know we're right this time. So these 2, let's get rid of the 1 in the corner, we can get rid of the 2. They're a 1, 3 pair. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 3 is 7. This has to be a 1 now. That makes this one a 2 at the bottom of the row, and this one a 1. And now the 8 diagonal's working and the 9 diagonal's working. Again, here we are. Oh, we can put in this 26 again. We know the pair of 6, 5 and the 6's on the ends. That's all still true. Now we have a 5, 6 pair here. Then we can finish this column with 4 and 2. That's all fine. Now, what are we going to do with the 17 diagonal, the last one left? Well, it's the same situation again, virtually. We've got a 1 here. We can't have 6's on the ends. So the most we can have here is 4, 3, and the alternative is 4, 2. So we can put in a 4. Let's again do the same sort of thing with 4, 3, 2. Now we'll imagine that we were using the, actually we'll imagine we were using the 4, 5 on the end. So this one, these 2, let's imagine we're using the 2, 4 version actually first. So in the 2, 4 version, this is a 2, that's a 4. These now add up to 7, and the outsides both have to be 5. So the diagonals all work. We get a 1, 3 here, and suddenly this cell's impossible straight away. 5, 1, 3, 6 in the column, 2, 4 in the row. That can't be it. Okay, so now we're finally onto the final correct track, and we know that, let's just get it to there, these 2 must be 3 and 4, so I'll take the 2 out of there. We get a 1, 2 pair in here. At the ends we have 4 and 5, but we know which way round they are because of this 4, so we've got a 5 there and a 4 here. Now this cell has to become a 3 because it can see every other digit. This one's a 5, we can fill in the top row. We can complete box 1, that fixes both the 3 and 1 and the 2 and 4 pair. We can finish off the rest of this box down here, and finally we're on track for a solution. So I think this one's going to work finally. That's the whole point of the video, so let's hope that's right. 2, 3, 4 and 5. So there we go. That completes Sam Kappelman-Lyons' astonishing 6x6 little killer Sudoku. I hope you finished it quicker than that, but I'd be fascinated to know if you could use any other method other than bifurcation, which is what we call kind of trial and error, testing one way out and ruling it out. Obviously, one way to finish it quicker would be to happen to choose the right version early on and then just fly through it. No problem if you did that. And certainly it's a perfectly valid competition strategy, but it doesn't give logicians their kind of necessary hit of reasoning. But thanks very much for watching. Do have a look at the 6x6 Classic, which certainly isn't this hard, but is a lot harder than anybody would expect such a little classic could be. And I hope to see you again soon on Cracking the Cryptic. Do stay safe and keep well. Bye for now.